Hey, real quick, if you're driving right now, just keep your eyes on the road and turn it up a little. And if you're at the gym or on the train or making breakfast, perfect. Because this episode is built for exactly that moment. The commute, the walk, the quiet 10 minutes before your day gets loud.
We're Cash Talk Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Ali, and today we're starting something we've been planning for a while, a full series on one of the most important books about money ever written. Not because it's full of formulas or stock tips, but because it's about something nobody talks about enough.
Why intelligent people, people with MBAs, people who work in finance, keep making terrible decisions with their own money.
The book is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. 5 episodes, and today is episode 1. Let's go.
Okay, Ali, before we get into the stories, let's set up a few terms, because Housel uses some ideas that sound familiar, but actually run a lot deeper than you'd expect.
Keep it tight, though. This isn't a textbook.
Agreed. First one, behavior. And I don't mean habits in a self-help way. I mean the way you actually act when money's involved versus the way you think you'd act. There's a massive gap between those two things for most people, and that gap is what this whole book is about.
Like, you can know that you shouldn't sell your investments when the stock market crashes, but knowing it and actually not selling when your retirement account is down 40% are two completely different things. One's knowledge, the other is behavior.
Exactly. Second term, financial behavior bias. This is the idea that your financial decisions aren't made in a vacuum. They're shaped by your personal history, where you grew up, what your parents went through, what economic events happened during your 20s. And those experiences create biases, invisible lenses that color every money decision you make.
Most people think they're making rational choices, and they are rational to them based on their own experience, which brings us to the third term.
Soft skill versus hard skill. A hard skill is technical, knowing the math of compound interest, reading a balance sheet, understanding how bonds work. A soft skill is behavioral, being patient enough to let investments grow, staying calm when markets crash, not buying things to impress people you don't like. Housel's argument is that the soft skills matter more, way more.
And we're bad at them. Not because we're dumb, but for reasons we're about to get into. Okay, Sarah, let's start with the setup. What's the opening of the book?
So Housel opens with a story from when he was a valet at a hotel in Los Angeles during college. And there's a guest, a tech executive, who's legitimately brilliant, like genuinely smart. He designed and patented a key component in Wi-Fi routers in his 20s, started multiple companies. Real success, real money.
I feel a butt coming.
A massive but. This guy had what Housel describes as, and I love the phrasing, a mix of insecurity and childish stupidity when it came to money. He walked around with a brick of $100 bills, like inches thick, and showed it to anyone who'd look. At parties, bragging, out loud, drunk half the time. Nobody asked.
The guy who makes sure you know he's rich is usually the one you should be most worried about.
Right. And then one day, he hands a colleague several $1,000s in cash and says, "Go down the street and buy me some $1,000 gold coins from the jewelry store." The guy comes back with the coins. The executive and his friends walk down to a dock overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and they start throwing the coins into the water, skipping them like rocks, laughing about whose went furthest.
I'm sorry, $1,000 a coin?
Into the Pacific. Just for fun. And then a few days later, he smashes a lamp in the hotel restaurant. The manager tells him it's $500 and he needs to replace it. The executive pulls out a wad of cash, hands the manager $5,000, and says, "Here's $5,000. Now get out of my face, and don't you ever insult me like that again."
And I'm gonna guess this story does not have a happy ending.
He went broke. Housel found out years later. The whole thing collapsed.
So he wasn't broke because he was bad at business. He was clearly skilled at business. He went broke because of how he behaved with money.
That's the thesis, right there. Housel's core argument in one sentence. Doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are, and a lot to do with how you behave.
And behavior is hard to teach, even to very smart people.
Now flip it, because Housel immediately gives you the other side of this coin. There's a man named Ronald Reed. Real person, died in 2014 at 92 years old. His Wikipedia entry opens with, Ronald James Reed was an American philanthropist, investor, janitor, and gas station attendant.
That is a sentence I did not expect.
He fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years, then swept floors at JCPenney's for 17 years, bought a 2-bedroom house in his 30s for $12,000, and lived there the rest of his life. His main hobby was chopping firewood. When he was widowed at 50, he never remarried. By all accounts, nothing flashy, nothing loud.
Nothing that would make you look twice.
When Ronald Reed died, he had a net worth of over $8 million. He left $2 million to his stepkids and more than $6 million to his local hospital and library. The people who knew him were completely baffled. Where did it come from?
And the answer was?
No secret, no inheritance, no lottery win. He saved what little he could, invested in blue-chip stocks, solid, boring companies, and then he waited. For decades, just let it sit and grow. That's it, from janitor to philanthropist.
Now, put these two guys side by side. The Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive, Richard Foscone, who in the mid-2000s borrowed heavily to expand an 18,000-square-foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages. The monthly maintenance cost alone was over $90,000.
$90,000 a month just to keep the lights on.
Then 2008 hits, the financial crisis, and Foscone's entire empire, all that leverage, all those illiquid assets, turns to dust. He tells a bankruptcy judge, I currently have no income. First, his Palm Beach house gets foreclosed. Then, in 2014, 5 months before Ronald Reed quietly donated millions to his community, Foscone's Greenwich mansion is sold at a foreclosure auction for 75% less than it was worth.
The janitor outlasted the executive, not because of IQ, not because of connections or education, because of behavior. Patience versus greed, simplicity versus ego.
And Housel makes a point here that I think is genuinely underappreciated. He asks, in what other field does a person with no college degree, no training, no formal experience, nobody, massively outperform someone with the best education, the best training, the best connections? You can't think of one. There's no version where Ronald Reed performs a heart transplant better than a Harvard surgeon. There's no version where a janitor out-engineers the world's top aerospace team. But in investing, in personal finance, it happens all the time because it's not a hard science, it's a soft skill, and the soft skill is behavioral.
That's the foundation of the whole book, and once you really sit with that, it changes how you look at financial success and failure.
Okay. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. What's the argument?
So, the question Housel is trying to answer is, why do people make financial decisions that seem completely irrational from the outside? And his answer is that those decisions almost never are irrational. They just make sense to a different set of experiences than yours.
Unpack that.
He says, and this is important, your personal experience with money makes up maybe 0.000001% of everything that's ever happened in the financial world. But it makes up maybe 80% of how you think the world works. So 2 people with equal intelligence, equal access to information, can look at the same situation and reach completely opposite conclusions. And both conclusions are rational to them.
Give me a concrete example from the book.
Okay, he uses inflation and the stock market. If you were born in 1970, the S&P 500, the benchmark index for American stocks, grew almost tenfold in real terms during your teens and 20s. That's the period when you're forming your core beliefs about how the world works. You grow up believing stocks are the greatest wealth-building tool in human history, because for you, they were.
But if you were born in 1950...
The market went essentially nowhere during your teens and 20s, adjusted for inflation. Same market, different generation. You grow up believing stocks are a trap, a game for other people. and both of you think the other one is crazy.
And this isn't a theory. There's actual research behind it.
Economists Ulrika Malmendier and Stefan Nagel did a 50-year study on American consumer finances. They found that people's investment decisions throughout their entire lives are heavily anchored to the economic experiences they had as young adults. If you came of age during high inflation, you invested less in bonds for the rest of your life, even when conditions changed. If you came of age during a strong stock market, you put more into stocks for decades, regardless of what the data said.
Not because of analysis, because of what they felt when they were 22.
Not intelligence, not education, just the dumb luck of when and where you were born.
That's actually a little uncomfortable.
It should be. And Housel gives you the JFK example, which I love. When Kennedy was running for president in 1960, a reporter asked him what he remembered about the Great Depression. And Kennedy said, essentially, I have no personal memory of suffering. My family had one of the greatest fortunes in the world. We had more servants, bigger houses, we traveled more. The only thing I saw directly was my father hiring extra gardeners so they could eat. I didn't learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard.
And people were genuinely alarmed by that answer.
Right, because how do you put someone in charge of the economy who has no emotional understanding of the worst economic catastrophe of the last century? It was a legitimate question, because Housel makes this point. You can read about losing everything in a crash. You can study it, understand it academically, but you don't have the emotional scar tissue of someone who actually lived it.
And the person who lived it can't fully explain it to you either, because their behavior, their financial caution, their distrust of certain institutions, their obsession with keeping cash, looks like paranoia from the outside.
But it's not paranoia. It's memory encoded in behavior.
I want to stay on this for a second, because I think this explains something that frustrates a lot of people. Why do otherwise smart people do what seems like obviously stupid stuff with money?
The lottery ticket example?
The lottery ticket example.
Okay, so Americans spend more on lottery tickets every year than on movies, video games, music, sporting events, and books combined. And the biggest buyers, by a wide margin, are low-income households. The bottom income bracket spends about $400 a year on lotto tickets. And the kicker is 40% of Americans cannot come up with $400 in an emergency. So the same people spending $400 on lotto tickets are the same people who couldn't cover a surprise car repair.
Which, from the outside, looks absolutely insane.
From the outside, yeah. But Housel asks you to actually try to get inside that situation. If you are genuinely living paycheck to paycheck, wages aren't growing, home ownership is out of reach, your kids' college feels impossible, every reasonable path to wealth that the finance books describe feels designed for someone who is already not you, then what does a lottery ticket actually represent?
It's the only vehicle you have for hope. It's the only moment where you can hold a tangible dream. For $2, you get to spend a day imagining a different life. And Housel says you're not buying a ticket, you're buying the experience of hope, which is worth something to people who have very little of it.
That doesn't make it a good financial decision.
No, it's still bad math, but it makes it a human decision, a completely understandable one. And the point isn't that the lottery is good. The point is that before you call something irrational, you have to actually ask, rational from whose perspective, based on whose experience? No one is crazy. They're just working with different data, different emotional history, different scar tissue.
And there's one more layer to this that I think is really underappreciated. Housel points out how new this whole system is. We act like personal finance is this ancient, established discipline. But it's not. The 401k, the main retirement savings tool for most Americans, didn't exist until 1978. The Roth IRA wasn't born until 1998.
1998, that's not old.
If the Roth IRA were a person, it would be in its mid-20s, barely old enough to be making its own financial decisions.
The Roth IRA is younger than a lot of our listeners.
And before Social Security, which didn't become meaningful until the 1980s, most Americans worked until they died. The labor force participation rate for men over 65 was above 50% until the 1940s.
Retirement, the idea that you deserve a dignified end of life where you're not working, is at most 2 generations old, and we expect people to navigate all of this perfectly?
We're all just new at this. Every single one of us. The game is too new for any of us to be fully acclimated to it.
Which is why Housel says, we all do crazy stuff with money, not because we're crazy, because we're new to this game, and we're all playing it from inside our own unique experience of it.
Okay, chapter 2. And this one, Sarah, this one hits different.
Luck and risk.
Set it up.
Housel opens with Bill Gates, specifically with a question that most people never really sit with. Why was Bill Gates in a position to build Microsoft?
The standard answer is genius plus work ethic.
And both of those are real. Gates is genuinely brilliant, genuinely driven, but Housel adds something. In 1968, when Gates was 13 years old, he attended Lakeside School just outside Seattle, and Lakeside had a computer.
That doesn't sound unusual today.
In 1968, it was almost unheard of. The concept of time-sharing computing, where multiple users can access the same machine, had only been invented 3 years earlier. Most university graduate programs didn't have access to what Lakeside had. And the reason Lakeside had it at all is because a math teacher petitioned the school's Mothers Club to use the proceeds from their annual rummage sale, about $3,000, to lease one.
A bake sale funded Microsoft.
Essentially. And Housel does the math. In 1968, there were roughly 303 million high school-age people in the world. 18 million of them were in the U.S., 270,000 in Washington state, 100,000 in the Seattle area, and about 300 attended Lakeside. Bill Gates was one of those 300.
1 in a million.
Literally, and Gates himself has said it, if there hadn't been Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. He doesn't shy away from it. He knows he got extraordinarily lucky in a way that had nothing to do with his intelligence or his work ethic.
Now here's where it gets heavy.
Kent Evans, Gates' best friend at Lakeside. By Gates' own account, not Housel's, not a biographer's, Kent Evans was the best student in the school. The two of them were inseparable. They talked on the phone for hours. Gates says he still remembers Kent's number by heart, decades later. They built a computer program together to solve Lakeside's class scheduling problem, something professional administrators couldn't do manually. Kent had the same drive, the same business mind, the same vision. Gates has said they would have gone to college together, built a company together.
And?
Kent Evans died in a mountaineering accident before he graduated high school. About 36 people die mountaineering in the United States every year. The odds of it happening to any one person in high school? Roughly 1 in a million.
1 in a million luck. 1 in a million risk. Same magnitude, opposite direction.
That's exactly how Housel puts it. Same force, same magnitude, working in opposite directions. And neither outcome, Gates's success or Evans's death, was fully in their control. They were both products of forces outside themselves.
So what do we actually do with that? Because this can feel like, okay, nothing matters. It's all luck. Why try?
And Housel is very deliberate about not going there. He's not saying effort and decisions don't matter. He's saying they don't account for 100% of outcomes. And we constantly act like they do, both when we celebrate success and when we judge failure.
Talk about the success side.
So when someone becomes massively wealthy or successful, we have this instinct to study every decision they made and extract lessons, copy their morning routine, read their book, follow their system. But if a significant portion of their success was luck, and in extreme cases it almost always is, then you might be copying the wrong things.
Housel uses Vanderbilt.
Cornelius Vanderbilt, the railroad tycoon. His approach to business famously involved ignoring laws that got in his way, and because he succeeded wildly, everyone celebrated him as a bold visionary, a scrappy innovator who didn't let outdated rules stop him. But Housel asks, how close is bold to reckless? There's a version of that exact same story where the courts catch up to Vanderbilt, his company collapses, and he becomes a cautionary tale about corporate fraud. Same decisions, different luck, completely different narrative.
The line between inspiringly bold and foolishly reckless is often invisible until after the fact.
Which is why Housel says be very careful about who you praise and be very careful about what lessons you actually draw from their success, because you might be praising the luck more than the skill, and you might be trying to learn lessons from an outcome that wasn't as repeatable as it looks.
Now flip it. Failure.
This is where it gets personal for a lot of people. When someone fails financially, goes bankrupt, blows a business, loses their savings on an investment, our default reaction is bad decisions. That person made bad decisions.
But Housel says that's not always right either.
He gives this example. Say you buy a stock. 5 years later, it's gone nowhere. Maybe you made a genuinely bad decision. Or maybe you made a good decision that had an 80% chance of working out, and you just happened to land in that unlucky 20%. The decision was sound. The outcome was bad. Those are two different things.
And we almost never make that distinction.
Almost never. When it's our failure, we find reasons to explain it away as bad luck. When it's someone else's failure, we see bad decisions. It's very human, but it means we're constantly misreading the lessons of both success and failure.
And there's a really important practical consequence of all this.
Two of them, actually. The first one is about how you study success. Housel says focus less on extreme individual cases and more on broad patterns. The more extreme a success story, the less applicable it probably is to your life, because extreme outcomes usually involve extreme luck in one direction or the other.
Like, Warren Buffett is one of the greatest investors in history, but trying to directly emulate Warren Buffett is probably not the most useful thing you can do, because his results are so extraordinary that luck almost certainly played a significant role. Whereas something like people who have control over their time tend to be happier. That's a broad pattern that applies to basically everyone.
Exactly. And the second practical consequence is about failure. Housel says the real skill isn't avoiding failure. It's arranging your financial life so that a bad outcome here or there, a bad investment, a missed goal, a business that doesn't work, doesn't knock you out of the game permanently, because you need to keep playing long enough for the odds to work in your favor.
Survivability. Stay in the game long enough.
And be a little gentler with other people and with yourself when things go wrong despite doing everything right, because sometimes the risk just hits and it's not a character flaw.
Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Shiller, when Housel asked him what he most wanted to know about investing that we currently can't know, said, the exact role of luck in successful outcomes.
One of the most decorated economists in the world, and what he wants to understand most is luck.
That should tell you something. Okay, we've got a question for you, and we actually want you to sit with this one, not just let it slide by.
Think about someone you know, or someone you've read about, who you've judged for a financial decision. Maybe someone who went bankrupt. Maybe someone who made an investment you thought was dumb. Or maybe someone who got rich and you thought they didn't deserve that.
Now, with everything we talked about today, ask yourself, how much of that outcome was their decision, and how much was the experience they grew up with? How much was skill, and how much was luck or risk that had nothing to do with them?
That's not a rhetorical question. It's worth actually writing down, because the answer changes how you judge other people, and more importantly, how you judge yourself.
All right, before we wrap up episode 1, let me tell you what's coming next time, because we covered the foundation today. Why behavior matters more than brains, why no one is actually crazy, and why luck and risk are forces that deserve way more respect than we give them.
But episode 2 goes somewhere darker, because Housel's next question is, okay, what happens to people who do accumulate real wealth? What destroys them?
And the answer is something that affects people at every income level, not just billionaires. It's a trap that took down executives worth $100 million, men who had everything, and it wasn't bad luck that got them.
It's the inability to define enough, the goalpost that never stops moving, and why social comparison is wired into us in a way that makes it almost impossible to feel financially okay, no matter what you have.
We're going to get into compounding, and I mean actually get into it, not the surface-level explanation,
because when you understand what compounding actually does over real time, it changes your entire relationship with patience.
Episode 2. Don't skip it, especially if you've ever hit a financial goal and then immediately thought, okay, but now I need more.
That feeling has a name, and we're going to talk about it.
This is Cash Talk Podcast.
Learn the money, build the English. We'll see you next episode.